What's up, family? Welcome to another episode of Success in Business Podcast. Look, this podcast, as I've told you over and over again, is designed to educate, empower, and equip the small business owner and minority business owner to succeed in business. And this is going to be a very exciting episode. I got for my Success in Business family, Dr. Miriam Harris, coming in all the way from Vancouver, Canada, on her birthday weekend. She came here, came to see Usher, and she taking time out to come and talk to family. I appreciate it. Welcome to the show, Dr. Harris. Again, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate it. Now, the topic of the day is minority business owner and their mental health is an important topic. We sort of skirt around the issue. People talk about the issue as it relates to their personal mental health, as it relates to just existing. But this thing is just focused on, this episode is as a business owner, entrepreneur, the business health, what can you do to mitigate stress, how did it come about? And before we dive into this, Dr. Harris, please tell family a little bit about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. I'm a licensed professional counselor with a background in forensic psychology. I have my PhD from Michigan State University. The emphasis at the time was sex therapy, but I did go into substance abuse disorders. I currently own an agency that provides community-based mental health for marginalized populations. And on top of that, I also have a private practice where I work with people who may have like high conflict issues within their relationships, within, just the dynamic of mood disorders, personality disorders. And so I've been a business owner for going on 6 years.
How long have you been doing mental health counseling?
I've been doing mental health counseling for almost 14 years.
Wow. So, Dr. Harris, what are things that we hear on the news and we talk about is, business owners in general and their mental health, especially this day and time, what's going on in the world, what's going on in our country. Is there some level of understanding that business owners need to know about their mental health as business owners?
Absolutely. I think when you ask that question, the big picture or the big thing that I hear a lot is distress, and I hear burnout. And the way that happens is exactly what you said. We're consumed with, environmental factors. And then some of us, because we go into business and we never really think that it's going to affect our mental health, we're just like, we know we got to do it. So we tend to, that usually is the last thing that we address in, our mental health.
As a business owner, one of the things, and that's the whole reason why Success in Business podcast is around, so people could really understand and see that they're not alone. One of the things sometimes as a business owner, own many businesses, sometimes me personally, and also some of my clients have shared with me, they get like a lonely feeling sometimes. They don't have anyone to talk to about their issues, or when they want to talk about their issues to their loved ones and everything like that, because they can't maybe relate to their vision of their business. They're not really helping them. Can you kind of go into that, lonely? Is that something that's like really like a diagnosed issue? Is it an issue, or do you have to just get over it? Of course, you're gonna be lonely. It's your business. What is your response to that?
Good question. So, one of the things that we deal with, especially if we're first generation entrepreneurs like myself, you are going to have that sense of isolation and loneliness, because you will go and you will find that your family, they're still of the mindset that it's okay to clock in and clock out and have someone else, to dictate their, their success. Or the ceiling that they get to. But when I think of that, just there is actually a diagnosis for that, and it's called moral disengagement. So what happens is we grow up thinking one way, right? We grow up with these ethical standards that our family may have imposed on us. Then we get out into the real world and we find out, like, your success is really dictated upon yourself. No one's coming to save you. There isn't any magical potion, for success. And it's like everything that you put into it is what you get out of it. So you almost have to disengage from what you're used to believing in. You have to unlearn a lot of those habits that you may have inherited by way of your environment, i.e., your family.
Moral disengagement. I mean, success in business, we learn new things all the time. And so let me ask you a question. Another thing that my clients have shared with me is how do they know, or what signal is there, or what type of elements go into them understanding that they're having a mental issue, or something that they need to just pay attention to? Because I tell you, a lot of times with me, certain things I just push through, just like physical pain. How does a business owner know when to just like, hey, I need to, kind of evaluate or kind of check myself or something? I mean, how does one know?
Well, the base on the basic level of that, you're gonna find yourself not enjoying things that you used to, right? Like something as simple as maybe going to your favorite restaurant, eating there, or hanging out with your friends. You'll start to find yourself isolating more. So that
Mm,
would be the biggest that I can think of. The biggest indicator that you're
right,
about to
right,
go
right.
into a distressful moment.
Uh-huh.
Um, but bigger than that, I think what you said was, just being an entrepreneur and feeling that sense of loneliness. That loneliness is going to actually trigger you to start to have like what they call moral injury, and that's where you think that everyone knows that you have this going on,
Right.
but and this is why they have maybe stopped reaching out to you, or again, you're going back into that isolating those
Mhm.
behaviors. When you start to isolate, that's kind of like the tipping point. That's when you
Right,
have to
right.
actually reach out for help, because after the isolation starts to become the feelings of loneliness, the hopelessness. And I spoke about this before when we were at the mayor's forum. You'll start to have a escapist mentality where you're
Mhm.
trying to disengage from reality, and you start living in this kind of fantasy
Mm.
world where what's kind of in front of you is it's not, you're not processing it like you normally would.
Right.
For example, I think of sort of like a a police officer, right? If
Mhm.
they get into a distressful moment, or they get into a place of where we call it moral injury, they'll start to bypass the things in which they thought were morally inaccurate, or they didn't align with their values. They just bypass them. Am
Mm.
I making sense? Like you really don't engage with what's wrong and what's right. You start to just kind of exist.
So is this something that, as an entrepreneur, and then by the way, just go hint hint, I'm going to, this is success in business, so I got to connect the cultural ethnic aspect of mental health and business owners. But before we get there, I want to know, is this to be expected, or is this a situation that affects only a small amount of people? And as an entrepreneur, there's some entrepreneurs that never go through this.
No, every single entrepreneur that I've ever met and that I've interacted with have always experienced
Wow.
it's almost like you have to go through this in order to build that resiliency in business.
Wow.
And
Wow.
some of us don't make it out. Some of us, we give up and say, you know what, I'm just going to go back into this place of like, let me clock in and clock out, because it seems much easier. Because let's be real, like being an entrepreneur, you don't have anything to fall back on, right? It's
Mhm.
everything that you're doing is based on what you've built.
Yep,
So
exactly.
you start to toggle with the idea of, if I walk away from this, who's really going to be injured except for
Mhm.
myself, and I'll be
Mhm.
okay, right?
Right,
But
right, right.
rather than deal with the issues that I'm experiencing, I would prefer to go back into kind of like the day to day, the nine
Wow.
to five, as we say.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, so now let's connect being a minority business owner, okay? And I would imagine we need to compare it with, I guess, majority business owners or anything like that. I don't know. Do we have to be in their shoes, or I mean, what I'm trying to get family to really peer into is there any unique cultural challenges, implications that go into mental health that we need to be aware of as entrepreneurs because we might be of color or because we are female?
There is. And the cultural aspect of that would be the systemic issues like
Mm.
discrimination, right? Or lack of access to resources. And I think when I think of that, I think of the lack of cultural responsiveness, right? Just in terms
Cultural
of being
responsiveness.
a
Wow.
yeah, just in forms of in terms of being a black woman in business. I think one of the things I experienced is people think you're just going to figure it out. Oh, she'll figure it out. You
Mm.
know, she comes with this, sort of personality trait that makes her seem like she's assertive. When really internally, I'm dealing with imposter syndrome, and I am struggling with whether or not I'm good enough to be in the room. So one of the
What is
big things.
okay? You said imposter syndrome. What is that?
So, imposter syndrome is the idea that you sort of don't deserve to be in the place that you are because you don't see yourself the way other people see you, right? Like the perception of others may be very grand, and to yourself, you're like, well, why? I don't deserve to be here. Although you have all the credentials, you've earned your way there. Imposter syndrome says that you're almost like Superman, you know, you're Superman. They see you as Superman, but you really still see yourself as Clark Kent, if that makes sense.
You,
Like
you sound like
you
you're
don't.
analyzing Goodwill Pierre. What's going on, man? I feel like I'm in a session, Doc. This is unbelievable. So let me. So I mean, Dr. Harris, there's so many things we can get into that's so important. Um, let me go in a direction, of course, off script. you know, um, how do minority business owners check in with regard to their mental health? Is it, or is that such a process? I mean, how do you kind of prepare yourself so it's not too late, so you won't stroke out, so you won't have that, so you won't snap back at your loved one. So where is there a any type of has it been measured to a point where you know that, hey, I need to make a conscious effort to do this so I can keep my mental health kind of at least in check or something? Does that exist?
Without some professional help, I think that it's going to take a lot of self-awareness.
Wow,
Some
yeah.
of us don't possess those skills that the intelligent the emotional intelligence to be able to look within ourselves to say, well, what is it that's ticking me? What is it
Mm,
that's kind of pushing me over the top? So I mean, I would first say seek professional help, because a therapist like myself can walk you through the day to day to figure out what are those triggers that is causing the distress. What
mm,
are the things that we can do that are applicable to you as a person, because we're all individuals, right? Your mental health has to take precedent over everything else, because if you're not good on the inside physically, everything else is going to start to break down. So
mm.
seek professional help first. If you can't do that,
Right.
start at the very basic level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The At the
Whoa, you went
bottom
deep. You
level.
went deep. Say, repeat that slower, please. What did you say? What did you say?
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Maslow. Maslo. Spell it, please. Maslow. Okay.
LOW.
Okay. Maslow. Y'all
And
Google that, please. Y'all Google that, family.
that's
Y'all.
at the bottom level. It's hydrating, sleep, eating,
Oh,
because
I
though,
got you. I got you. I got you. Wow.
yes,
So you're saying physical attention, if you don't have the ability to be self-aware of your mental health, you can't go to a psychologist or psychiatrist or a counselor. The physical, taking care of yourself physically lends itself to mental awareness, or at least mental health conditioning, or better mental health. Is that what you're saying, suggesting?
I absolutely,
Wow.
because you'll find that the
Like
higher stress,
de-stressing.
yeah, the higher stress you have, then your blood pressure starts to increase, right? Like you start to eat things that are not very nourishing. You'll find that you're having migraines, and it all ties within each other.
What about behavior? You start doing like negative behavior. Does that count too?
Very much so. You'll start,
Mm.
we call that edging, like kind of trying to push the envelope or engaging in high risk behaviors. High risk behaviors does not necessarily just mean sexual behaviors, but it could
Uh-huh.
be things like shopping, overeating, overindulging. Um, and especially in business, I know that I've experienced this, but I'll say, oh, I'll just do that later. And you kind of push the deadline back to the
Right.
point that you find that that deadline is pretty, it can devastate the business if you don't address it. So yeah, at the start at the physical level first. And I'd say like, drinking plenty of water, those
Uh-huh.
type of things. Cause you'll start to notice a difference when you're stressed out and you're still taking care of the physical parts of you versus when you're not, because stuff will start breaking down.
Wow. How much time do I have, team? Yeah. So I gotta time. I love success in business, but then again, it leaves me wanting more because time goes by so fast, and I appreciate you. But I got to get to two additional topics that I've never asked before, and I don't think I've ever asked you this, years that we've been doing this for minority business owners. Doctor, talk about the relationship with loved ones, like spouses, and what I want the family to understand is how how can you mentioned emotional intelligence. Is there a way that you can measure a response that might be received in a negative way by your spouse because you're a business owner, and understand that that could be because of you're going through a mental thing with regard to being an entrepreneur? Is there, or is versus you just being a pain in the butt? You know what I mean? What type of things can you look at in order that might affect your family or your spousal relationships?
That's a really good question. Actually, I think that it's important if you decide to go into business that you have a talk with your significant other. Even if you start a business, and you've been married beyond 30 years, this is a conversation that needs to happen. And any phase of life, a conversation needs to happen where you talk to your significant other and you talk about what's to be expected from you and
Mm,
what you would like to receive in terms of support,
mm,
because a lot of times our spouses, they know us well enough to know, like, when we get to a place of distress or just being ready to tap out, and ask them to be your accountability partner and say,
mm.
let me know when you start to see me get to this point. Well, what does
Wow,
this point look
wow,
like, right? So setting boundaries and letting them know when you
wow.
see me start to go beyond a 12-hour day, or when you see me start to put more money in than I'm getting back. Like, but you also have to be receptive, right? You have to be
You
able to
gotta be a yes.
receive. Yes, because some of us, we're used to having that partner, and we may talk to them, how we get. We may talk to
Yeah,
them in
yeah,
a way where they're like, listen, but let them know, look, I've evolved as a woman, and truthfully, I'm in a different place and
yeah.
I want you to go with me. And this is what it looks like. And kind of try to outline that for them so they'll know when you're doing those 15-hour days, like, I'm only going to do this for 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks, please check in with me and let me know. Like, you understand what I'm saying? But it
Yeah.
comes from just having that conversation.
I remember when I was in law school after my first year. My wife told me one time. She said, "I can always tell when you're about to have your finals because of just you're not really responsive." At first I started to get like kind of upset, but I thought about it. I said, "You know what? My wife is not going to do anything to not going to do anything purposely to make me upset. So this must mean she loves me." So without being, I almost had to be mechanical and intentional and not be emotional. I said, you know what? If she says that, I'm going to think of ways that I can, kind of subsist or do something to kind of curb that, because she's actually being vulnerable by telling me this. I need to be, I need to receive it and be vulnerable by just receiving it. And that's something that I lost. I just kind of thought about, but I didn't apply it to like being a business owner. And that's kind of interesting what you're saying. Um, walk with your partner, have your partner walk with you to kind of help you identify when you're changing so that you can have peace in the house. That's really so. We going one more thing, Doctor. I want you to first tell us your closing like statements or things concerning what you would wish everyone would do as business owners, especially minority business owners, as it relates to their mental health? What advice can you give that's a general piece of advice in addition to seeing a counselor? And well, you know what, before we do that, let's tell people how to get in touch with you, your website, and phone number, so they can like hit you and reach you if they have any questions or anything like that.
Absolutely. My office number, I can be reached there primarily 24 hours. We have a crisis line that you can actually call as well. That's 24 hours. And that number is
Even when ushers sing it.
even if I'm in the Usher concert, I will absolutely.
I love it. I'm sorry I interrupted you, Dr. Harris.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
I am currently accepting new clients, and so in order to get to that place, though, I really like people. I try to give them the opportunity to identify if we're a good fit, because a therapist is very much like a spouse. You want to make sure that this person, they give you the feel good, and they allow you to be vulnerable and open in this safe space. So I always let people sort of do a consult with me just to tell me their issues, and then we can move forward if they so choose. So I have a website. It's nirvanabehavioral.com. You can submit questions there. You can request appointments. And then I have an office. I have a couple of them, actually. I have two in Houston. I see folks in San Antonio and in Dallas as well. You can reach me at 832-301-3822. And that's our office line and our 24-hour crisis line.
That number, they see the number right there, so they can write it down if they want. Dr. Closing statements that you have for minority business owners and mental health. What advice would you give the minority business owner and how to keep their mental health in check?
I am absolutely passionate about being a minority business owner and just talking to folks and helping them navigate wherever they are in their business, even if it's just the beginning phases, like the idea, right? But one of the things I think people need to understand is that you have to build resiliency in order to face these challenges. And how do you do that? Well, you need to take your mind away from how we view challenges, right? Instead of viewing them as roadblocks, view them as opportunities. You want to, and how do you do that? Well, you got to start cultivating optimism. Like, I'm one of those people, very cynical, very, very pessimistic. I try not to be that way, but naturally we can be that way because we're navigating kind of in the dark. So cultivating optimism by having positive self-talk with yourself. I tell myself all the time, I always say, I'm, PhD level, nationally credentialed. Like, I will look in the mirror and I practice that because I know people will question who you are and where you are.
Like affirmations.
Absolutely. Positive affirmations, positive self-talk. And then lastly, you need to start to develop what I call positive coping mechanisms. And again, you can do that, practice them with your partner. You may have a spouse that may have some positive coping skills that they can share with you. You can get these from a therapist. You can sign up for a podcast, your podcast. And you can get it for free if you can't afford a therapist, but there are resources out there, but you have to be intentional. When you said the word intentional, you have to be intentional and know that it's not going to be easy, but once you start to build that resiliency and building that support system, you'll get there. So,
oh man, Dr. Miriam Harris, thank you so much for joining Success in Business Podcast on your birthday weekend. Freshly seamed Usher, Vancouver, Canada. I'm just so honored that you can be with us. Family, thank you so much for being part of this episode of Success in Business Podcast, talking about mental health. Please don't forget to subscribe, hitting the button below, subscribe. You can find us if you're getting this information from somewhere else at Success in Business channel. You can also hit us on TikTok at Success in Business, Instagram, Facebook at Success in Business. This episode was brought to you by Nirvana Behavioral Health. Thank you so much for being part of our Success in Business show. And I wish everyone the best of blessings and mental health and of course, success in your business. God bless.